Hey there, let's talk about overheating in the new Sony A7 IV. Does it overheat? Yeah, but not in every mode and every situation, and we'll get into that. I did a bunch of tests here in my office, but before we get into that, I do want to talk about overheating a little bit. Now, the cameras like the A7S III, FX3, they don't overheat because it's basically a one-to-one readout. One of the biggest concerns that I had with this camera is overheating because it has to oversample the image. I knew with all the new Sony cameras that I've used, like the A7S III, FX3, FX6, they're gonna be great. The autofocus is great, color science is great, all that kind of stuff. But my biggest concern was the oversampling and the overheating. The A7 IV is a 7K image downscaling or downsampling, whatever you want to call it, to 4K. And so I had some question marks about the overheating. The biggest example of this lately, obviously you guys know about the Canon R5, and you have to understand that when you have these hybrid cameras that have higher megapixels in them, you don't need that many megapixels to make a 4K image. So what it does is it oversamples the image, and how it processes that image will determine how much heat is generated and the quality of the image. Now, for example, in the R5 and also in this camera, it oversamples it. So it takes that bigger image, in this case a 33 megapixel 7K image, and it oversamples it, and it does that computationally in the camera and turns it into a 4K image. The result of which is awesome. There's tons of detail, beautiful image, but it generates a lot of heat. And it's the same thing with the R5. And so one way around that is you can have line skip mode or pixel binning. It's another way to convert that high megapixel mode into a 4K image without generating as much heat because it's less processor heavy. Anyways, that's my big concern with this camera. It was overheating. Now everyone's use case is different, and in my case here, the testing was done inside my office here, and I just had the camera on a tripod. It's room temperature in here. I know that it's winter time now, so I can't do this out in the sun because usually I am shooting outside. So you have to keep in mind about your use case and the different modes that you are going to be shooting with. One thing before I even get into the results of my testing is make sure you have the auto power off temp set to high. I know a lot of people when they first get a Sony camera, they don't know to do this. So if you don't do that, this camera will overheat very, very quickly. So make sure you do that. In terms of settings for my tests, as I said, I was using this on a tripod in my office here. I had the auto power off temp set to high. I tried to give the camera as many jobs as possible, so autofocus was on, auto white balance, active stabilization was turned on, breathing compensation was turned on, and I was shooting in S-Log3. And what I did for these tests was I shot everything in XVACS SI in 4K, and what I wanted to compare there were the overheating with two different kinds of cards, the Sony CF Express Type A card and the ProGrade V90 SD card. Mainly because those are the cards that I have, but also I think those are very common options out there. So for these tests, I did them with the screen closed and also with the screen open. So that's what I'm referring to when I say that. I did 6 different tests, and here are the results. 4K 24 with the CF Express card and the screen closed. The card just ran out of memory and it had no issues with overheating whatsoever and no warning at all. I did the same test with the SD card, 4K 24 with the screen closed. I got 1 hour and 32 minutes, and again, no warning and no shut off. So to me, there's no issue with 4K 24 overheating in my office here outside. Maybe in the summer, I'll have to test it at a later date, but that's what I've been getting here. I didn't even do the test with the screen open because for screen closed, it was fine. So it's one of those things where, you know, maybe you do need the screen open for warmer situations. Now on to 4K 60. And the first one I did with the CF Express card, and I had the screen closed and it overheated in 26 minutes. So pretty quick. Then I did the same test, 4K 60 with the SD card and the screen closed, and it overheated in 27 minutes. Both of those basically are the same to me, 26, 27 minutes, so overheated pretty quickly at room temperature with the screen closed. Then what I did is ran the tests with the screen open, figuring that it would be more heat dissipation, and so what I got there was 4K 60 with a CF Express card with the screen open, overheated in 70 minutes, and for that I did have to reformat the card in the middle, but that's what the combined time. And for 4K 60 with the SD card, it overheated in 66 minutes. So again, 70 minutes, 66 minutes, those are pretty similar to me, but the big takeaway here is going to be that the CF Express card and the SD card really didn't make a difference between the two of them, and the screen open made a huge difference. As I mentioned earlier, I did all these tests in 4K XAVC SI, and I didn't have a chance to test every format. So what I did was I collaborated with my buddy Chris Brockhurst. He did a bunch of tests and had some conclusions about other recording formats and also about batteries.
Hey Josh, thanks for having me on and allowing me to share the results using the XAVC-S codec. A7IV is a fantastic camera, but it does have overheating issues. Now, in my experience, with the 4K 60, if you have the screen closed, you're going to have issues with overheating. And not screen closed like that so you can't see, I mean like screen closed so you can actually see what's going on. You're going to have overheating issues. If you open that up in the XAVC-S format, you're going to get much better, longer recording times. 24 frames per second in XAVC-S is a similar story. If you have the screen closed, you might get around an hour before you start to encounter issues. Open up the screen there and you can go above an hour without even seeing the overheating warning on there. I also tried out using a couple of different batteries, both Sony and RAV Power. There's not a lot that we can say other than you get a little bit more power, a little bit more time, before it starts to overheat with a Sony battery versus the RAV Power in some tests and not in others. So these are a little bit more inconsistent. If you're looking for the absolute best performance out of your camera and battery, you want to use the official Sony batteries. Thanks for allowing me to share this, Josh. Cheers.
Thanks, Chris. It was really great to collaborate on this and get a little bit more information out to my audience here because there's a lot of things to test. And I think we both agreed on the fact that 4K 60 overheats and the screen being open makes a huge difference for much longer recording times. Now, if you guys want to check out Chris's full video, I'll leave that link down below. And also, please go check out Chris's channel if you haven't already. Great content up on there about filmmaking and also a lot of Sony content. My biggest question is going to be about 4K 24 in the heat. Again, I can't test that right now, but out in the sunshine on a warm day, will it overheat? Because that's the most important mode for me. That's one of the reasons why I didn't want to use the R5 anymore for video, because it would overheat very quickly. Now, 4K 60 on this camera or like 4K 120 on, the FX3, like I don't use slow motion for long periods of time or high frame rates for long periods of time. So for me, it's usually B-roll. It's a couple seconds here and there. I'm not so concerned about the overheating there, but for me, I don't let 4K 60 roll for indefinite periods of time. If I do long talking head stuff, it's 4K 24. So that's the mode that's most important to me, and I'm really curious to see how this will do out in the heat. But these are the results I got so far. Now, there is a mention in the Sony manual about overheating and times and screen being open, all that kind of stuff, which you can see right here. This is on page 464 in the manual. I will leave a link down below if you guys want to dive into that a little bit more. Otherwise, hope you found this helpful, and if you did, please consider hitting subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.